Chapter 17. Silver wasps buzzed above their heads in the muggy afternoon air. Sharp-beaked crimson crows cawed at them from the branches of the giant trees. With a tired sigh, the girl asked, "Could we rest again, or are we fairly close to Tintura?" Slowly dropping back beside her, Tun said, "Still another 5 miles to cover, missy. We'll rest now if you've a mind to." "I would appreciate it." She spotted a fallen log and went to sit on it. Moving closer to Flash, the Lion Man said, "When I told you Tintura was a half-day's journey, I did not reckon on our having a woman in our party." His back to the resting girl, Flash said, "This may turn into a way for me to get to the capital." Tun lowered his voice. "You have something in mind?" "Will she be able to get in touch with the palace from Tintura?" "Aye. There's a radio sending station there." "When an airship comes to pick her up," said Flash, "I should be able to borrow it." Chuckling softly, Tun said, "I'm quite sure you'll find a way, my friend. I may, in fact, linger in town long enough to lend a hand." His face clouded. "Be careful with this girl, though, for I sense she may not—" "Well, I think I'm able to push on." The auburn-haired girl rose. With a grunt, Tun moved on. The girl took Flash's arm. "May I walk alongside you for a while? I'm really not used to this much walking," she said. "Court life spoils you after a while." "How long have you lived in the palace?" "Too long," she replied. "I often grow very weary of it all. When that happens, I wander off." "Doesn't that annoy Princess Aura?" "No. Well, not awfully much. There are a great many servants and only one princess. There are more than enough people to cater to her whims." "You don't care much for her." "She's all right. I don't think she really cares for all that pomp and foolishness any more than I do. If your father is emperor, well, you're obliged to live a certain way, aren't you?" "What about Ming himself?" "I don't want to talk about him." They trekked on in silence for a time. A scatter of bright yellow moths swirled across their path. "I've only just met you," the girl said finally. "Still, I get a very strong impression you're—" She frowned, searching for the words. "That you're unlike any of the other men I know." Flash grinned, saying nothing. "What territory do you come from?" "Oh, what territory do you come from?" she asked him. "A distant one." The girl's frown deepened. "And why do you travel with a lion man?" "Tun has saved my life. I've saved his," replied Flash. "It's a good reason for becoming friends." "Well, you've saved my life as well," she reminded him, "which means we are friends too." "It does, yes." Her hold on his arm tightened slightly. "How do you come to be in the swamp?" "We jumped off a river barge." "What caused you to do that?" Flash said, "We didn't want to be sold into slavery." "Well, it was indeed fortunate for me you jumped ship where you did," she said. "Flash?" "Yes?" When we reach Tintura, will you allow me to take you and Tun to dinner? There are 1 or 2 relatively decent inns there along the river. We can dine together, and then I'll make arrangements to get back home to the capital." "I'd be happy to join you," said Flash. The dining room of the Cold Harbor Inn was large, its stone walls painted a pale gray. Copper utensils and tankards hung from pegs in the ceiling beams. A fire blazed in the red brick fireplace. Flash, the girl, and the Lion Man were seated at a square table near one of the leaded windows. This was the first hour after sundown, and thick fog filled the narrow winding streets of Tintura. Tearing a chunk of brown bread off the loaf in the breadbasket, the Lion Man said, "A pleasant enough place by all appearances, much pleasanter than that low bistro I was so unceremoniously heaved out of the other evening." He chomped at his bread for a moment. The girl was watching the fireplace. I really don't feel like going back to the palace quite yet. Don't you think you've been away about long enough? Flash asked. Well, yes, I suppose I have. She smiled wistfully at him. Now, in my home country, Tun said after an audible swallow, we'd call this bread a trifle bland. For real bread, with some taste to it, you have to start with cornmeal. We grow our... Hey! He stood up so quickly his chair flipped over and smacked the wooden floor. Make no further moves, Lion Man, warned the Royal Police Sergeant, who was striding across the room toward their table. He held a blaster pistol in his hand. 5 other policemen accompanied him. His eyes on the half-dozen approaching police, Flash also got up from his chair. You should have stayed with your fallen ship, Princess Aura, the sergeant said to the girl. She remained seated, lips pressed tight together. What means this? Demanded the Lion Man, his tail switching angrily back and forth. So we have befriended the daughter of old merciless Ming himself, have we? The princess kept her eyes lowered. I'm sorry. If you will but step outside, Princess, said the sergeant in an overly polite voice as he touched his left hand to his gold helmet, you'll find a flying machine waiting. I'm not sure I want to. My orders, which come from our commander-in-chief, the Emperor himself, are to make certain you return to the palace. I'd rather stay with my friends. Toying with the clasp of his cloak, the sergeant said, They'll be coming to the palace, too. Nay, not without a fight. Tun was easing one big hand down toward his borrowed pistol. The sergeant fired his pistol. The sizzling shot sliced the heavy dining table clean in half. One section toppled over onto the Princess Aura, tumbling dishes and utensils on her. The other half fell on Flash, sloshing him with soup and wine. My next shot will cut you in twain, Lion Man. The sergeant, with his free hand, helped the princess to her feet. My abject apologies to you, Princess, but I had to act to demonstrate my sincerity to these 2 so-called friends of yours. Why are you taking us to the capital? Asked Flash, using a white linen napkin to wipe himself off. Give all your attention to cleansing your soiled trousers, said the sergeant. Men, escort these 2 handsome fellows to the airship. Try to keep them alive, but kill anyone who makes the slightest attempt to escape. What's the meaning of this? Asked Princess Aura. Had I my way, Princess, I would shoot them both down here and now, especially that half-human Lion Man, the sergeant told her. I have, however, orders to gather recruits. Recruits for what? Asked Tun. The tournaments, answered the sergeant. Most of the low wooden buildings of the little town extended over the river, supported by poles and pilings. The last traces of sunset tinted the low clouds a bloody red. A blind man in a tattered cloak was feeling his way along the muddy riverside roadway with a knobby cane. A large black dog came snarling out of one of the waterfront shacks and charged the blind man. Be off, mongrel, he said as he clouted it over the skull with his staff. The dog yelped, retreating back into the dimly lit shack. The blind man shuffled on. Typical small town, observed Zarkov. He lay hidden in a stand of huge oaks across the road from the row of buildings. Huddled down beside him was Anmar. The rest of the men had remained with the horses a half-mile distant. The large warehouse there at the end of the row. The large warehouse there at the end of the row, said the sorcerer. This is the place wherein the scavengers usually dwell. Lights burning inside. You can make out the glow through the shutters. He narrowed his eyes as he watched the big wooden building. It, too, was built out over the river and had a slanting roof of rough shingles. The sunset glow suddenly left the clouds. The sky turned black and gray. Would they be likely to bring the thing right into their warehouse in broad daylight? Asked the doctor. This is a highly disreputable little town, replied Brother Anmar. A goodly amount of loot, plunder, and stolen merchandise passes along that road and over the river. Anmar pressed his fingertips to his forehead. I'll try now to read the mind of someone inside the warehouse. Zarkov shifted his position, coming to rest on his side and one elbow. He smoothed his beard, watching alternately the scavenger's hangout and the concentrating sorcerer. "Ah, good," said Anmar after a moment. "I've contacted one of our own, Brother Orlan." "So your boys were grabbed by this bunch." Anmar didn't reply for a time. "You see," he said, finally, "we can as yet only communicate telepathically over short distances. To get messages from far-off places, such as Ming's capital, for instance, the information must be relayed through several minds. Thus, Brother Orlan was unable to get to let me know of their plight until it came within range." "What does he have to say?" "These scavengers descended on our hideaway during the late hours of last night. The man on guard was napping. Thus he was unable to detect their approach either physically or mentally." Anmar's hand remained pressed to his forehead. "All our men are alive, being held in the warehouse until the scavengers arrange to sell them to slavers." "They've got the aircraft, too?" "Aye, indeed they have. They intend to sell it to a rebel group in the desert to the south. A fanatical faction, I might add, whom we have nothing to do with." "How many scavengers are inside there right now?" "I'll find out." Across the dark road, the black dog barked once more. "Only 3 at the moment," said Anmar. "Altogether, there are 9 of them, but the rest have ventured to the other end of town to a slovenly inn. Our men are tied and in a loft above the main room of the warehouse." "Loft, huh?" said Zarkov. "Any of the 3 looters guarding them?" "No, all 3 are downstairs in the vicinity of the cruiser." "Okay." Zarkov stood up, thrusting a hand into his robe. Under it was his flying belt. "Wait out here. I'll pick you up in the ship." "What do you intend to do?" "Go in through the roof," replied Zarkov. "Free your boys, overpower the trio of crooks, and get your air cruiser back. It shouldn't take long." "So think you?" "I guarantee it." As Anmar watched, the doctor left the ground, his hand on his flying belt. He drifted slowly up above the treetops. Then he flew across the street and landed on the slanted roof. "What instrument is he using?" Anmar asked himself, as he saw Zarkov kneel on the shingles and apply something small and glowing to them. A moment later, the doctor seemed to drop straight through the roof. No sound reached Anmar from the warehouse. On the dark river, a flat barge floated by laden with bricks. A yellow lantern illuminated its prow. Anmar moved a few feet forward. The black dog inside its shack gave a low, mournful howl. The side of the warehouse seemed suddenly to explode out into the night. Planks, shutters, glass went spinning, fragmenting, clacking together. Out through the opening came the air cruiser. "I do not have to guess who is piloting it," murmured Anmar, starting down toward the roadway to meet the craft. "Zarkov seems to have a particular fondness for knocking down walls." That was Princess Aura there. Pretty cool. Chapter 18. Down here there was no day or night. A damp darkness filled the twisting stone corridors and the low cells. On the floor of their cell was a scatter of moldy straw, and in an unseen corner something continually dripped. From around a dark turn in the dungeon corridor, an old man called out, "Fools, can't you see I don't belong here?" He repeated the question over and over. "Aye, I feel much the same way myself," said Tun as he paced the gritty floor. His tail snapped aside wads of straw. "What think you, Flash? Were we betrayed by that red-haired miss?" "Makes little difference." Flash leaned his broad shoulders against the wooden cell door, arms folded. "Aye, too true. Betrayed or not, we're caught good and proper." Out in the corridor, a whip cracked. "Stay in line, you dumb brutes! Stay in line!" Torchlight blossomed outside. Flash turned to look through the small barred window in the door. "A parade," he said. 2 royal police came first, moving sideways with stun rifles aimed at the line of chained, shuffling men. These men were huge, each well over 7 feet tall, and stoop-shouldered. They wore only tatters of clothes and were covered with brown fur. Their faces were ape-like. "Keep moving," said the sergeant at the rear of the line of the 7 ape-men. A thin young policeman, his cloak 2 sizes too large, carried a smoking torch. Noticing that Flash and Ton were watching, he said, "No need to strain. You'll be seeing these fellows up close mighty soon." The last ape-man in line snarled, his sharp teeth glowing dead while in the torchlight. He swung one shaggy hand at the boy. The young policeman stumbled back out of reach of the chained man, dropping his torch as he did. "Stun the brute," ordered the sergeant. Both of the stun rifles whirred. The ape-man froze, his teeth still bared. "Pick up that torch, you young idiot. Next time, don't go taunting the prisoners to the neglect of your duty." "Yes, sir." The sergeant took out a ring of keys and unlocked the stunned man from the string of ape-men. He glanced over at Flash and Ton. "I'll have to leave your worthy opponent here and send someone to get him later," he told them. "Don't be frightened. He's going to be stiff as long as a log for many hours." "It will take more than that poor lout to frighten Ton the Lion Man," said Ton. "Aye," the sergeant laughed. "You'll change your mind when you reach the arena." "When are these tournaments to be held?" asked the Lion Man. "Anxious for a fight, are you? Be patient. If all goes well, and I can get sufficient work out of these clumsy men of mine, this is your last day of life. Then the tournaments will be tomorrow." The glow from the spy screen etched deep shadows beneath Ming's eyes, making his sharp nose more prominent. He was hunched in a high-backed chair, hands gripping the carved arms, studying the images on the screens mounted on the wall. "Anyone can be broken," he murmured. "This Flash Gordon may act calm and unafraid now. Once he is in the arena, however, the situation will alter. He'll beg and plead for his miserable life then." A chattering laugh came out of Ming, shaking his thin body. The infrared cameras hidden in the cell brought the Emperor clear, sharp pictures of Flash and the Lion Man. "Strut while you may, Lion Man," said Ming. "Beg pardon, sir." A small round man in a white work smock came up and stood up to the rear of the Emperor's chair. He had a roll of paper under one arm, a sheaf of drawings in his hand. Ming kept his eyes on the screen. "I can see why Dale Arden might be attracted to such a man," he said. "It's a surface appeal, nothing behind it, and no intellect to speak of, I wager. Stop rattling those papers, Norber." "Forgive me, sir." With his free hand, Norber straightened his rimless spectacles. Ming's hand flicked out to shut off the spy screen. He rose up to his full height, turning to face the small round scientist. "What do you want, Norber?" Ming's movement caused Norber to take an involuntary step back. "The gun, sir." "What gun, Norber?" "The weapon which was taken from the alien prisoner, Dale Arden. I've made tests, quite thorough preliminary tests," he explained the nervous technician. "I haven't yet had time to get around to the other pistols." He held out his handful of notes and drawings. "I employ, at no small expense, scientists such as yourself, Norber, so that I may be spared the task of having to plow through a mass of technical trivia," said the Emperor. "Just tell me what you found out." One of the drawings shook free of the pile and fluttered toward the glistening black floor. "Please excuse me, sir," apologized Norber as he bent to retrieve the drawing. "Leave it be. Tell me about this gun, Norber." Norber straightened. "It's considerably ahead of any hand weapon we now have, even in a planning stage, sir. The microcircuitry is much more sophisticated than anything the Imperial labs have come up with, and its range and destructive capabilities are quite fantastic. I made a rough chart to show the comparisons between—" "Spare me the graphics, Norber," Ming interrupted. "Go back to your laboratory and get busy constructing a duplicate. I expect a working model by this time next month." "Sir," said Norber, "that may be impossible." "Impossible?" There's a memorandum here explaining, but since you don't want to read anything, perhaps I could try to explain. It comes down to this, basically. There are 3 small components of this pistol which I cannot understand. What they are, what purpose they... Get busy, find out. I intend to, sir, which is why I've come to you. Norbert pointed out at the now dead spy screen. If you could have that blonde alien fellow brought to our lab so we... No, he is to remain in the dungeon. We might be able to explain these puzzling parts to me. He might be able to explain these puzzling parts to me. Otherwise, we may require long weeks of work. You cannot consult Flash Gordon. But tomorrow you may interview Dale Arden. It's a rare woman who could understand... She's a trained interplanetary explorer, Norbert, with a good scientific background, said Ming. Should she not be able to help you, you'll have to wait until we find the 3rd member of their party, this Dr. Zarkov. All well and good, sir, but again, it could involve weeks of waiting, said Norbert. It really would be much simpler if I could just talk to Flash Gordon now. I have other things in mind for Flash Gordon. Oh, so? He will die in the arena tomorrow, said Ming. The air cruiser dropped gently down through the morning sky. Soon it was floating through a labyrinth of trees. Huge trees with branches of incredible breadth, crossed and twined, and built in among the gigantic branches was a city. Even I, exclaimed Zarkov in his booming voice, have never seen anything quite like this. Look at the size of those Chenopodium botries and the Rheum raponticum. Fantastic, fantastic. His beard rasped across the window of the passenger compartment as he studied first one aspect of Arborea and then another. That's quite a trick to build an entire damn city up in the trees, Anmar. It was begun several decades ago by a banished king, explained Anmar, and completed by Prince Baron since his exile. Look at the size of those walnut trees, said the impressed Zarkov. And what's that running up inside the trunk? An elevator. Arborea has several distinct levels, said the sorcerer. Not graded by class, you understand, but by function. A quite complex system of elevators, ramps, and moving stairways links the levels. Zarkov cocked his head far to the right, trying to see as high up as he could. You've got guns placed up there above the city? Aye, as a defense against an air attack by Ming. Thus far they have served us in good stead. The Emperor tried 2 raids, and both of those failed. We have not been troubled from the air for many months. Dr. Zarkov could see the citizens of the Forest Kingdom now as the ships cruised toward the landing area. They all wore clothes of forest colors. Everybody looks young, he remarked. It may be the healthy life in Arborea, said Anmar, though I suppose a goodly portion of those who have deserted Ming to join us are young in years. When one is older, there's oft too much to leave behind, and so they never make a move, no matter how cruel and repressive Emperor Ming grows. That's how they end up hanging from gallows in public squares, said Zarkov. Well, sir, I've always felt free to roam the universe. You should never own more than a portable property if you can help it. Though that notion is not original with Zarkov, it's still a good one. A scarcely noticeable bounce told him the ship had landed. The circular landing area was supported on an interlacing of huge branches and was pale gold in color. Standing beside the exit ramp was a middle-sized young man in a deep green cloak. As Zarkov strode from the ship, the young man came out onto the pale gold landing area to greet him. Dr. Zarkov, he said, allow me to welcome you to Arborea. I hope your stay here will give you a better impression of Mongo and its people than what has befallen you thus far. My name is Marco. After scanning the tree city, which rose up all around him, Zarkov said, Well, as long as I'm going to be a prisoner, I might as well serve my time in pleasant surroundings. Marco bowed his head for a moment. Allow me to express the sincere regrets of Prince Baron for having to recruit you in such a high-handed manner, Doctor. The problems we face, however, are such as to make it necessary at times. Just so you don't make a habit of it, said Zarkov, because if you get to believing that the ends justify the means, then you're not much better than Ming. I've lived somewhat longer than you have, And in a good many more places. I guarantee there's no such thing as a nice tyrant. Marco continued to avoid looking at Zarkov in the eye. He cleared his throat, saying, Prince Baron is on a hunting trip at the edge of the kingdom and will not return for a few days. I have, however, been in communication with him. He sends you his good wishes, Dr. Zarkov. The doctor asked him, What exactly is your function in this setup, Marco? I am, said the young man, what you would call on your planet Anmar. What is the equivalent term? Public relations man, supplied Anmar. Ah, that explains it, rumbled Zarkov. Now, said Marco, his face a bit flushed, Dr. Anmar will show you to your quarters, which adjoin the lab complex. I'd like to see the lab first, Zarkov told Anmar. Very well, come along. The rest of the sorcerers stayed behind with Marco. Anmar guided Zarkov toward an immense tree trunk at the edge of the landing disk. He reached out, pushed a button, and the trunk slid open. This will carry us part of the way. Swiftly, the elevator shot up through the hollow tree. Fantastic, fantastic, said Zarkov. They left the elevator to walk across a connecting ramp to another immense tree. They entered that and dropped down 2 levels. Stepping from this elevator, they were in a long, curving pastel green tunnel. At the tunnel's end stood a door. When Zarkov and Anmar were 3 steps from it, the door was pulled open. A tinny voice said, Hello, hello, hello. Zarkov glanced at the opener of the door as he crossed into the large laboratory building. Ha! A robot! The metal man was 5 feet high, a dusky copper color. His head was a rough caricature of a human head. Bowing, he said, Hello, hello, hello. I am at your service. I must admit, said Anmar, that I have not as yet eliminated all the flaws in my mechanical man. Flaws, echoed the robot. Once I get your weapons in tip-top shape, promised Zarkov, I'll overhaul your robot for you. Good, said the robot. Chapter 19. Pennants and streamers were everywhere. Every tower, every spire of the vast capital city appeared to have a yellow pennant flying from it. Streamers of scarlet hung from the streetlights and window grills. Huge flags, each with a sunburst symbol, were draped from balcony railings. It was a bright, clear, warm morning. The streets were already crowded with people moving toward the tournament area. The huge outdoor stadium was circular in shape, made of smooth stone. Flagpoles, each sporting a sunburst flag, ringed its rim. The towers of the Imperial Palace showed beyond it. 2 royal policemen, young and thick-set, marched down the main street against the current of the crowd. Their boots gleamed, their scarlet cloaks fanned out behind them. Pushing their way, they entered a large cafe. The proprietor was in the doorway to the kitchen. There were 30 small white tables in the room, but only 4 customers. Yes, gentlemen? Asked the gray-haired owner. Merely a routine visit, grandfather, said one of the policemen. This is tournament day, you know. Aye, I well know. It accounts for there being so little business, said the old man. And last week I could get no meat or fresh. On tournament day, said the other policeman, rubbing his stubby fingers over the gold armor of his breastplate, the Emperor wishes everyone to enjoy himself. I enjoy hard work. There's much work to do here. One of the customers left his table, hurrying to the door. I'll pay you tomorrow, Egon, he called. Now I must hurry to the tournaments. He left. A good idea, said the first policeman. You others, go. You, old grandfather, said his partner. You go as well. I have been to many tournaments in my life under kings and princes and emperors, he told them. The second royal police officer walked up to the old man and slapped him hard across the face. You don't seem to understand, grandfather. The Emperor wishes everyone to attend, so that all may see what happens to rebels and traitors to the new empire. The old man slowly untied his apron, letting it drop to the floor. I will go, he said. A murmuring grew in the wide street outside. 6 chunky white workhorses were pulling golden cage uphill toward the stadium. "Look there!" exclaimed a plump woman in a patchwork cloak. "I've never seen one before." "No man will have a chance against one of those." Within the strong cage stalked 2 large tigers, roaring, yowling in protest at their captivity and their hunger, slashing at the golden bars. The animals were a rare breed, originally found only in the wilder reaches of the forest kingdom. Growing out of the forehead of each tiger was a single white horn, 1.5 feet long and as sharp as a spear. Since Ming had come to power, these unicorn tigers were bred in the royal game preserve on the outskirts of the capital. The cage rolled steadily uphill. The people climbed, many of them reluctantly, toward the arched entranceways of the outdoor arena. Ming's bony fingers tightened around Dale's bare arm. "What better way to learn about my people than by witnessing an event such as this, my dear?" "I'd rather stay right here." Dale was dressed now in a sleeveless floor-length gown of a style much favored by the women of the palace. "I'd like my own clothes back, too." Ming raised his thin eyebrows. "I thought you had selected this lovely and most becoming frock yourself." "2 burly women came in here and sat on me this morning," replied Dale. "They took my jumpsuit and left me this little creation. It was either wear this or nothing." "Again, my dear, I must apologize for the overzealous nature of my servants," said the Emperor. "You cannot as yet fully appreciate how much it means to each and every one of them to serve me well. Now come along, my dear. It is nearly midday. We must go to the royal box." "I don't want to go." "You must. I really insist." Holding her arm, he guided her toward the gilded door of her chamber. "You will witness many unusual sights, I promise." Resignedly, Dale allowed him to escort her down a series of lofty corridors, then through an underground passageway. In 10 minutes they emerged into a large glass-enclosed box overlooking the arena. Several members of Ming's inner staff, including Eric, were already seated there. A moment after Ming ushered Dale to the seat next to his, young Haldor brought Princess Aura into the box. Ming drew his cloak tighter around himself before turning to speak to his daughter. "I am very pleased you've returned to the capital in time for this eventful day." The auburn-haired Aura took a seat behind her father. "Your police persuaded me to come home," she said, "and Haldor persuaded me to come home." Haldor smiled at the girl. "Like a spoiled child, Aura, you often pretend to dislike things you're really anxious to take part in." "You're very perceptive, Haldor," said the princess. "I often wonder why you're not able to see your own assistants taking bribes." "A gutter rumor," said Haldor, slouching down next to the girl. "If you persist in hanging around in gutters, Aura, you can't help hearing such things." Ming rested an elbow on the rail of the royal box. Stroking his beard, he surveyed the crowded tiers of seats. "A goodly crowd," he said. "Every bench filled." He raised his right hand, waved it. From all around the great oval, arena trumpets blared. Uniformed men were stationed at 10-foot intervals, golden trumpets aimed at clear blue midday sky. Ming leaned close to Dale. "I have a highly efficient administration," he said. "Notice how everything is occurring on schedule." "What," asked Haldor, "is the first event?" "The traditional one," replied the Emperor. "The procession of prisoners." Trumpets sounded again, the fanfare echoing. Down at the other end of the arena, a high iron gate swung open. "You should have put someone in better shape to lead off," remarked Haldor. The first prisoner onto the tan mark of the arena, a frail man in a tattered tunic, stumbled and fell to his knees. A palace guard goaded him with a spear. There were 50 men in line, which came straggling out of the dark tunnel mouth into daylight. Some were battered and bent, shambling in their gait. Others strode forward, proud and straight. A dozen guards armed with spears and stun rods prodded the prisoners around the arena toward the Emperor's box. Dale suddenly sat up straight, inhaling sharply. She noticed the blond young man near the end of the line. "Flash," she said. Behind her, Princess Aura echoed the name. "Flash." Ming laughed.